Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and it's time for me to pay my dues. On this channel, I like to do a series called Hot Takes, where I react to the hot takes that you, the community, post to me, that I have to react to. Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't. But I like to be a fair individual. Equivalent exchange. You provide, I will provide as well. Give and take. If you are willing to provide hot takes to possibly be laughed at or ridiculed or just talked about on the internet, then I will do the same. In this video, I provide my hot takes, at least some of them, for Final Fantasy XIV. And the implicit understanding is that I'm objectively correct because I have a YouTube channel and I'm pretty loud on the internet. Do we all have an understanding? Good, let's get into it. I'm going to rip a little bit of a band-aid off, and this is an opinion that I've held for quite a while that I haven't really voiced or talked about. And it concerns one of the most hallowed stories in Final Fantasy XIV, and that being Shadowbringers. Now, I've made videos about how I think Shadowbringers is one of, if not my favorite story in all of Final Fantasy. And I think I also claimed fiction, but I do have one critique for it. Okay, I actually got two, at least off the top of my head. The bigger, more overarching one, though, that is more conceptually based, is that I don't think Shadowbringers was dark enough. Specifically, I think it was very front-loaded. You have the famous Welcome to Shadowbringers scene with Tesleen, which I absolutely adored. It's a scene that really does a great job of setting the tone, and just how vicious of a location the first actually is, and how big of a threat the Sin Eaters can be, and what a horrific way to go it can be to be transformed into a Sin Eater. But they do this with a lot of Shadowbringers, where the first interaction you have with this concept or this idea, it's very graphic and brutal, but afterwards it's just kind of sped through and it's whatever. In the dungeon, Holminster, when we see other things be transformed, we just see the cocoon and then it hatches and then we have a monster we like wipe out in a few seconds. Or if we see an enemy transform into a Sin Eater, it's over within the span of like half a second. And there aren't too many scenes after that point with Tesleen that are really that gory and brutal. Don't get me wrong, there's a couple. You have that one scene in Yulmore where the cat boy has to like cut his wrist because Fat Albert like ordered him to. And you have that other scene where the Sin Eaters invade the Crystarium and Lakeland on the Whole, where you see a few people die, and like that's nice and all, don't get me wrong, but with the tone of the story that was set with Tesleen in that very early stage, I do kind of wish that Shadowbringers aired on the side of being a bit more brutal and in your face about it. I remember, I don't know if it was an interview, but I remember hearing about how they had to play the Tesleen scene rather safely because they had to fit within the age restriction of the game. They didn't want to go higher. And like, that's possibly the reason they only used that scene once. But I would have liked to have seen more scenes consistently later on in Shadowbringers with that layer of brutality. For a story like that, I think it does a great job of setting the tone and keeping the tone and always reminding you of the stakes involved. The other side of my critique with Shadowbringers is that it was kind of advertised that we were the villains this expansion. And like, I get it, right? It was all based in perspective. Like, some people relish the light, mainly the people in Yulmore, and with us trying to bring darkness and night back to it, some people did view us to be villains. It never really had that vibe that we were going against the entire world, though. For Yulmore, sure, but that was kinda it. Outside of like a few scenes that like went over quickly. At least for me, with how it felt as if we were in the role of being the hero and not the villain of this story, even if we had good intentions and all that, and we're doing the right thing. I don't view it as a negative for Shadowbringers, but for me at least, that is a perspective that I would like to see them revisit at some point in the future, where we are perceived to be the villain even if we're not, but really hone in on that idea and hammer it home. Okay, now we're gonna get into one about aesthetics. I think the soldier outfits for the three great companies look stupid. All three of them. Like, whenever we have those battle scenes, especially back in Stormblood, where it involves all the members of the grand companies and all that, I could never take the Eorzean faction seriously because they never looked like they were equipped for battle, and I thought thought they looked kind of stupid. It's one of the reasons I actually really liked Ishgard back when I did Heaven's Sword, because I'm like, yes, we have people with actual armor or things that look like actual soldiers. I like that. It's an aesthetic that I prefer overall. It's actually one of the things I really like about Dawnshell, funnily enough. The Tombstone set that is like supposed to be representative of the soldiers of, I always mix these names up, Tulialol, looks really dang good. Now, most of these hot takes have been rather negative for me, so let's have a positive one. I actually rather like 4.0, Stormblood. Yeah, I know, especially with like Dawnshell, a lot of the conversation I've seen is that quite a few people didn't like Stormblood, especially 4.0. I did. Like, I get the lease issues, right? I understand them. She wasn't handled the best. I still kind of liked the character, though. And there was some funny scenes, like her punting a Namazu 5 stories up in the air. Speaking of, I rather like the Namazu. I think the Pirate Zone's kind of goofy, but I really like Doma. I really liked Azam Step. I liked the final zone in Alamigo, the Locks. Thought those places were cool, and while I didn't particularly like the other 2 Alamigo zones, the story there with the Empire and the whole Alamigan resistance, I rather liked. Fordola is still one of my favorite characters, and a lot of my favorite characters and setups for the story originate in Stormblood. Yotsuyu, Gosetsu, Fordola, the whole Raban storyline I loved. And also, Stormblood has one of my favorite songs that is so woefully underutilized in Stormblood. It's borderline comedy compared to how much the other key songs of the expansions are handled. I love Revolutions. That song is amazing. I listen to that song all the time. The lyrics are pure poetry. One kingdom's fall is another kingdom's freedom. One sovereign's war is another sovereign's peace. One mother's pride is another mother's sorrow. Their tears both soak the land that they love. And then in the stanza right before that, you have this absolute banger. Soft is the breeze that can set a petal free, and yet 'tis the storm that doth see the petals soar high o'er the trees in the throes of liberty, till unstirring skies consign her to memory. Like, the lyrics are so well written in that song. I have a massive soft spot in my heart for Stormblood on the whole, and the patches for Stormblood are still some of my favorite story this game has ever had. I love the tension of the Scions falling one after the other, us not knowing what happened to them, who was doing it, the whole lead up to Shadowbringers. It was such a great moment in time for the game, in my opinion. Also, I love the raiding in Stormblood. I never raided like hardcore or anything like that, but I love the Evilise raids, I love the Omega raids, I love the Omega storyline, I love the whole thing with Alpha going on there. That final scene with Alpha and like little Omega running across the land is still one of my favorite finales to any storyline in this game. I love the Beast Tribe quest in Stormblood as well. I just love Stormblood a lot. Like, yeah, I prefer the stories of Heaven's Ward, Shadowbringers, and Endwalker, but for me, being just below them is not like that big of a blemish. Another thing that I quite like is A Realm Reborn. It's not perfect, and I think it's like aging rather sourly, but for me, what I like about A Realm Reborn so much is not necessarily just the MSQ, but it's the experience of joining Final Fantasy XIV on the whole. I loved finding out you can get your own Chocobo. I liked joining a grand company. I liked picking what my starting city was based on my class. And I liked the whole managing between the MSQ and my class quests. I still miss that as a concept, and like, I get it, right? With all the jobs we have in the game, it'd just be a bit unfeasible to do them all. But I still prefer job quests over role quests any day of the damn week. And becoming a new job at level 30 alongside the big plot twist that happens in the story at level 30 with the invasion of the Waking Sands is chef's kiss. Like, yeah, I get A Realm Reborn can be rather slow for a lot of people, and I do think they should address it and streamline it further in the future. But as an experience on the whole, I fell in love with Final Fantasy XIV, not in Heaven's Sword. I already loved the game when I got there. I fell in love in A Realm Reborn. I remember the old free trial that got you to like level 35 or something, getting to the church with Sid in it and being like, I need to play this game because I need to find out what happens next. Okay, now another one that could be a hot take. I don't like the DPS jobs. I'm not talking about it in terms of gameplay, I'm talking in terms of aesthetics. It's also, funnily enough, one of the reasons I've gravitated towards tanking nowadays, because the tanks have all the aesthetics that I really care about. Giant weapons, heavily armored, looking like a badass. Just monk, ninja are cool to me, don't get me wrong, but I do wish we had something that felt more like a knight for the DPS. Speaking mainly of melee DPS here, by the way. And you may be going, Jmulls, what about Dragoon? Well, like, yeah, you are right, don't get me wrong. Dragoon and Reaper definitely appeal to me the most in terms of aesthetics for melee DPS. But I wish we had somebody who just, like, stood their ground with a sword doing a lot of DPS. It's not like Viper. I'm rather picky when it comes to this, and it may not make the most sense. Basically, what I'm saying is I wish there were, like, DPS versions of, like, Paladin and Dark Knight, and even Gunbreaker, and heck, even Warrior, because that's the aesthetic I really like, but they're all for the tanks. Look, these are my hot takes, right? They're all personal preference at the end of the day. I just kind of wish we had a few more, like, DPS jobs that are grounded in, like, low fantasy, if that makes sense. Like, I would love a job based around, like, Clive from Final Fantasy XVI. I still want a Rune Knight. Like, Ceres from FF6. She's one of my favorite characters in all of Final Fantasy because she's just awesome. Having all these magical enchantments for your sword, stuff like that. Steiner's another good one. I can be weirdly picky when it comes to my personal preference for aesthetics. Like, for Paladin, I wish I could change the animation color for all my abilities to, like, a gold or something. Instead of having, like, all these blue abilities, I wish we had something that felt more like a golden Paladin, if that makes sense. Just because that's the aesthetic I really like. Could be residual from my time playing World of Warcraft all those years ago. And, like, you're probably right, but at the same time, I like what I like. And my other, and probably final hot take for today's video is my favorite villain in Final Fantasy XIV. If we're talking about simply the plot and the story that happens, it's Emmett Selk. That's not a hot take. However, if we're talking vibes, right? If we're talking, in my darkest hour, if I have to pick one character that I enjoy the most, simply because whenever they're on the screen, I devolve to the, like, puddle of hype and adrenaline, it's Xenos Galvis. Any day of the damn week. And I talked about this a little bit before, how when he was first introduced, I thought it was kind of stupid that we just came off the back of Heavensward, of this giant champion, and all of a sudden, there's this guy who's way stronger than you, surprise, and he beats your ass. But when we had that yap session at the top of the Great Menagerie in Alamigo, and then when he came back, oh god, when he came back and was like, I'm going to burn the world. This empire over here, Garlemald, they're in my way. Oh, what? You're too distracted by them? Don't worry, bro. I got you covered. Let me go solo them real quick so that we can have a 1v1 atop the ashes of this dead world. My man understood me. Like, dude, I don't care if he's edgy. I don't care if he's well written or whatever. I think he is. He gets me. He gets what makes me hype. Dude burned the entire world simply because he wanted to respect the 1v1. I appreciate it. When we were in trouble, in our darkest moment, my man literally drank our leftovers with the Mother Crystal, decided to turn into a dragon we whooped the ass of before back in Stormblood, and said, you know what? Let me solo this. I'm gonna fly across the universe to get to my best friend so he can ride on my back so he can fight a little bird girl who's the concept of despair made manifest. And then afterwards, at the edge of creation, I'm gonna still demand a 1v1 from him. And my man had the best jobs in the game. He went from Samurai to Reaper. Dude, you cannot construct a character to appeal to me more than Xenos Galvis. His voice acting, mwah, chef's kiss. Do I need a reason? Dude, I nearly transcended when he had that yap session with Alize in Garlemald. He doesn't need anything called, like, emotion. That's for losers. Dude, a reason for a being who needs that dumb crap. No, he just wants to respect the 1v1. He views us to be his friend. He just wants to pound us all night long, not that way. Like, he's easily my favorite character when it just comes to point to a character that gets me hyped up the most. It's Xenos. I go back and watch my reaction to Endwalker, or at least Endwalker's finale. I was over the moon. Because one, I predicted that entire segment. I predicted that it would happen in the center of the world, not at the end of the universe. But like, I predicted the 1v1, I predicted he would come and save us. Dude, realizing I was right, and being so happy that I was right because that's what I wanted, it was pretty much like my own fan fiction coming to life. Dude, mwah, chef's kiss. Wouldn't have it any other way. And I'll never agree agree with any criticism drawn to my boy's way. I will stand there, a bastion of the light, defending Xenos till the day I'm gone. I'm not joking, I may be the #1 fan of Xenos, yay Galvis, across the entirety of this community. And if I'm not, I really don't know if I want to be. I've seen what some of you all make for fan art, yeah? I'm still mentally scarred from Bakul Jaja, yeah? I don't need that in my life. Yeah, I'm good staying in my lane. And with that, I think I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.